Welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. And on this podcast, we are going to begin building the aggregate expenditure model. And let's first say what some of these words mean. These words, aggregate expenditures, mean, first of all, aggregate means spending. Sorry, aggregate doesn't mean spending. Let me back that up. Aggregate means total. Aggregate means total, and then expenditures, this is what I meant to say, means spending. So the aggregate expenditure model is the total spending that happens in society. It's the total spending that happens in society, and its spending is going to be really important to this aggregate expenditure model, which really was this goes back to Keynesian economics from 1930s, and will eventually lead to us building a model, this aggregate expenditure model, using what is sometimes known as the Keynesian cross, but that will come on a future video. So the first thing we always do when we build a model is we state a couple of assumptions. So let's make some assumptions here at the beginning. There's going to be several assumptions here. The first one is that we are going to assume that prices are fixed. So when I talk about prices here, I'm talking like about the price index, or the price level. This might be something like the CPI, or maybe the GDP deflator, or whatever. However it is that we're going to measure prices in society, we're going to assume that price level is fixed. That does not mean the prices of individual goods and services are fixed. This is the general price level in the economy is fixed. So that's assumption number one, and that assumption will carry throughout this model. Actually, we'll drop it at some point, but it'll go through a lot of the model. We will assume the prices are fixed. Number two, we're going to assume interest rates are fixed, and we'll talk about that in the future. But the reason why we're assuming that is because gross investment, is going to be part of this model, and we're going to want to hold gross investment fixed, and to hold that fixed, we're going to hold interest rates fixed. I'll explain on the future video how all that works. So just for now, interest rates are fixed. Number three, we're going to assume there's no government spending or government taxation. So that means that government spending is going to be equal to zero. So when we do our formula, y equals c plus I plus g plus nx, g is just going to go away. We'll see that on the future podcast as well. And we're also going to assume that we're in a closed economy, that there are no imports or exports. So closed economy, exports and imports are this should say zero. Imports and exports are zero. There are no exports, there are no imports. So that means that net exports are going to be equal to zero. So they're just going to go away. Now, central to this model is a new concept that is called the marginal propensity to consume. The marginal propensity to consume. Let me use some additional language here to describe this. Some additional language we might use is, for marginal, we would say additional. That's, of course, what margin means. Talked about that on previous videos. The second term here, propensity, that's kind of like the tendency you have to do something. And then finally, consume means to buy something. So we might think of this model, or this concept, the marginal propensity to consume, is the additional tendency to buy something. The additional tendency to buy something, the marginal propensity to consume. And so we write it like this. We write the MPC, the marginal propensity to consume, is the change in consumption divided by the change in Y, the gross domestic product. And remember, gross domestic product is three things. We said this on a previous video. We said gross domestic product is total spending in society, it's total production in society, it's total income in society. And right now we want to think about it as income. So technically speaking, technically speaking, this marginal propensity to consume is defined as the change in consumption in response to a change in disposable income. Okay, I say this over here, however, we are just going to assume for now that disposable income is the same as GDP. We're just going to assume that those are the same, and that's close enough for what we're going to be doing in this model. And so what we're really asking here is we're asking when somebody makes one more dollar of income, how much of it goes to spending? When somebody makes one more dollar of income, how much of it is spent? How much of that additional marginal dollar is spent? So if I earn one more dollar and I spend 75 cents of that dollar, then my marginal propensity to consume would be 0.75. Okay? That's how much of an additional dollar of income do I use for consumption. And I'll lay this out with a lot of much more clear in a clear way and using specific numbers so you can see it. So we'll do this on a future podcast. For now, just very quickly, if you make one more dollar, if you spend 75 cents of it, your marginal propensity to consume is 0.75. And then there's one other additional concept that is called the marginal propensity to save, and the marginal propensity to save is 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume. Because after all, if you make another dollar of income, you can do two things with that dollar. You can either use it for consumption or you can use it for spending. So in my example, if I earned one more dollar of income and I spent 75 cents of it, then my marginal propensity to consume was 0.75, and then that means that my marginal propensity to save is 0.25. If I make another dollar, I spend 75 cents of it, and I save the other 25 cents of it. Now, we're talking about this for me as an individual. What we really want to do is we want to talk about this marginal propensity to consume for society as a whole, and we will talk about that on a future podcast. Thanks for joining me. This has been Mr. Hagan, and we'll see you on the next podcast.